Hello everyone, welcome to a very special edition of the SBK Betting Podcast. It is a look at the Cheltenham Festival. Yes, I've said those two words that we always steer clear of from an early part of the season. We're always a podcast that likes to look at the here and the now and looking at the racing as it comes. But I feel, and we all feel, that we've got to a moment in time of the season where we can have a look at the championship races specifically, because we're still learning about the younger horses and we don't know anything about the handicappers at all. But we can have a look at it from an ANTE-POST betting perspective, especially as we've got our early entries. So we're going to have a look at the 5 championship races and get the thoughts of Tom Collins and Ross Miller. I have to remind you that this time last year, which went past me, I can't remember that I actually did this, but I'm pleased that I had done. I think I put up a Plutard at this stage, which was good, and Flooring Porter. So we're looking to see if we can do the same and find some angles at this stage for some of our horses, some of our selections for these big races. So we're going to kick off with the Champion Hurdle. As I said, Ross Miller and Tom Collins with me as always. Constitution Hill is currently 4-9 favourites, State Man 5s, Honeysuckle 11s, Pied Piper 64-1. And you can take any price for all the others. We've got the likes of Bob Ollinger, Epatante, Sharjah, Sir Gerhard. We don't know how many will turn up in this. A lot of them might fear for their lives for Constitution Hill. Some might be happy to take them on. We're pretty certain State Man will. Ross Miller and Imagine, not really a betting race.
I think Constitution Hill's probably got quite a good chance. No, I think it's probably, we're the SBK Betting Podcast, but I can only speak for myself. First and foremost, I just love horse racing and love watching good horses. And let's hope Constitution Hill gets there, because it's a chance to watch a really, really top class horse. Do I want to back him at 5-1 on, 9-4 on? Not at all. It's only going to diminish my enjoyment, to be honest with you. I think if you're minded to, you're trying to find the horse that's going to finish runner up to him, whether that's you put him in a forecast or each way, or with the some you can get the without market. For my money, I think Vauban at 11-1 is a decent enough price. I think he'll go off shorter than that. I really liked what he did at Leopardstown over Christmas. As we spoke about it at the time, I thought he got short of a bit of room at a crucial time, probably got a bit tired in his first run, and I think he outran expectations of trainer and owners. I think it's Danny Mullins has got experience on him now. That's a good thing. I think he'll have the ride in the big race. The harder they go, the more chance he's got. I think he's going to probably end up over further than this eventually. 4-year-olds coming 5-year-olds don't have a great record in the Champion Hurdle. Yeah. I don't think he's going to beat Constitution Hill in a million years, but 11-1 each way didn't seem the worst price for all this. Probably not a price I'm going to take myself. I think it's a race I just want to watch and enjoy.
Yeah, as we said, we are a betting podcast. This isn't a betting here as well, but it is horse racing. Anything can happen. We always say that. Constitution Hill has been pretty much flawless, but look, you've got to take his price as it is, and that's based on the performances that we've seen. If anything, as Ross has said, this is is sort of running on in behind him, and each way prices, and they're probably good value for what they are, because Constitution Hill is so short. TC, is there anything like that you can see running into a place, or are you going to take on Constitution Hill?
No, I'm certainly not taking him on. Certainly not taking him on. I have been stupid with some of the selections in recent weeks. Actually, just last week, but I'm not that stupid. I won't be taking on Constitution Hill. I think he wins. And I actually do think 4-9 is a value bet. Now, that comes with the caveat that 4-9 is still a very short price. Would I actually want to back him at 4-9? No. But if you're doing a Cheltenham opening day, Tuesday accumulator or whatnot on SBK, then of course you want to be adding Constitution Hill into that. If he's 4-9, I imagine it'll be more 1-5, like Ross touched on there. There is no horse in this field aside from State Man that even could hold a candle to Constitution Hill's quality. Sharjah, obviously, in the past would have been a player. He'll run in this race most likely. Vauban looked good a couple of seasons ago last year, but I don't really know what to expect from him. Constitution Hill is just A+, and he's facing horses that are B or C. You can make a load of comparisons with this Champion Hurdle to the Champion Hurdle that we saw last year. Last year, Honeysuckle obviously won the race. She came into Tuesday's feature with clearly the best form, the highest rating, and air of invincibility. Of course, at that point, she hadn't been beaten. She has since. But aside from her last year, the second favourite was Appreciate It, trained by Willie Mullins, who was yet to prove himself in a proper Grade 1 outside of Novice Company. And then there was a decent gap to the remainder with the likes of Epatante, etc. in the market. This time around, we have an unbeaten runner who has the best form, highest rating, and more than an air of invincibility. That horse is Constitution Hill. And I fully expect him to win. And away from him, again, we have a Willie Mullins trained second favourite in State Man, who is yet to prove himself in a proper Grade 1. Now, he has run outside of Novice Company, but he's basically had 2 trials against other Willie Mullins horses. So, I wouldn't really use that form as literal. And then, aside from those 2 in the market, we have Epatante in there again. We have Honeysuckle, both of whom might not even run in the race. And we have Vauban and Sharjah, who, they've got completely different profiles. But at the same time, I would never take them over State Man, let alone Constitution Hill to win. So, it's not a betting race for me. We've got 4 other races on this podcast that I'm sure we've got selections for. But at this stage, I'm just counting down days to watch Nicky Henderson's champion running the Champion Hurdle.
Yeah, look, we're lucky to have him. It'll be fascinating to see what they do next year. You'd imagine we're going to see him over a larger obstacle in Novice Company, and then look to. And what was also intriguing is that he's already been lined up for Aintree and Stepping Up in Trip as well, 2.5 miles. And so look, they're going to be experimental, and I think he's got a great owner in the shape of Michael Buckley that wants to take on these adventurous challenges. So looking forward to seeing him. My one, I just thought maybe I'll throw in one at a huge price each way, and that's First Street. I think he can get any price he wants, probably 60 to 1. But I think that he has made big waves this season. I think his run at Cheltenham last time behind Mary's Rock over 2.5 miles was fine. I don't think he's a 2.5 miler. He's a 2 miler. He's progressive. I think Nicky Henderson holds him in high regard. If you can get 4 places, that was probably a good bet. The thing is, I don't know how many horses are actually going to turn up. I don't think Nicky Henderson minds too much running his horses against each other sometimes if he has to. We've seen it happen, and maybe First Street will be one of them. I think he's a likeable horse that could continue to progress, and they're going to be hard placing him in handicaps now that he's rated 152, although I think he's in the Betfair Hurdle. Okay, we'll move on to the rest because they're more betting prospects anyway. We'll go to the Champion Chase. Energy even money favourite. He won this race last year in what turned out to be a bit of a disappointment with Shishkin not turning up at all and bombing out quickly with an injury. Edward Stone adds some spice to this race. He's 11 to 4. Blue Lord, will he go here? Will he go to Ryanair? That is a $1 million question. He's 6-1. Grenadine 23s, Nubian Negra 28s, Gentleman Demi 28s, and Chachon Poursoir 39 to 1. Funambule Savola 54 to 1. So, as always with the Champion Chase, Ross, we don't have a huge field size, and there's some ifs and buts about a lot of these. Blue Lord is the one that I'm really intrigued to see wherever he goes. Obviously, he's a stable companion to Energy. What do you make of Energy? Because I love the way he runs. I love his style, exuberance, but he didn't beat much last year in the Champion Chase, and he just had to sort of show up last time out. And then he got beaten in that proper race against Shishkin. So could something progressive beat him?
No. I don't think so. I think he was good enough last year in the Champion Chase, and you look at that and think if this was being run a year ago, Edward Stone, Blue Lord against the Shishkin that we knew then and the Energy we knew then, you wouldn't be talking about them getting near on what they've shown this year. I think he looked exuberant and back as good as he was on his reappearance run. He took a couple of chances, but I put that down to freshness. He's normally a pretty safe jumper. I think he's more rideable now than he was. He was pretty one-dimensional early on, and he was a sort of blast from the front and just go. I think he showed in the Champion Chase last year that he's got a brain. He can be dropped out and ridden a bit more conservatively. So I don't see him getting beaten. I thought Blue Lord, I agree with you, is the most interesting one away from him. He was really smart at Leopardstown. Looked just to put his jumping together. He'd not been a bad jumper, but he hadn't looked the most fluent and the quickest over his fence at time, and he looked much, much better last time. Now, Cheltenham Festival made a bad mistake at a crucial time, but Blue Lord was going, in my eyes, the best at the time. Finished very powerfully. He was a bit disappointing for me last year. I thought he was, exciting novice chaser, given what he'd done over hurdles the year before. If last year was a slightly subpar year for whatever reason, and this is more like the Blue Lord we saw as a novice hurdler, I think he's interesting. But I think if you went into Willie Mullins' yard and tried to have a conversation with him about Blue Lord being at the same level as Energamine, I think you'd get laughed out of there pretty quickly. Evans is a short enough price to take ANTE-POST, because we've got to be clear that ANTE-POST betting is about trying to find something that's going to go off shorter on the day. He probably will go off shorter than Evans, I would think. And he's going to go for this race. He's going to go for this race as well. So though it's a short price on my sort of radar, I think he's a great price at even money. I think Blue Lord to finish second at 6-1. If you're the sort of person that bets 6-1 shots each way, I think I'd be taking that now, because I think he'll be shorter again, because he's likely to run at the Dublin Racing Festival. And if that goes well, I could see him usurping Edwardstone to be second favourite. So those are the two I'm looking at. The next three we get a bit races we look at, we get a bit more exciting, I promise. But for me, I think Energy's very, very hard to beat, and I think TC's probably going to tell us now that Evans is a very good price.
Yeah, I can see him nodding away. And before I do, and I get the sense that there's plenty of support behind Energy from the pair of you. Edwardstone, he's the one that we always sort of ignore a little bit. I know we did in the Tingle Creek, and I think, I don't know why he doesn't get given as much. He doesn't have as much popularity as the others. He's come out in open company. Obviously, he had that unfortunate unseat, or was it more of a fall at last time out at Kempton. But they're so punchy about him. Can he be? Obviously, Energamine is got it all to play for, and he's clearly a horse that's just thriving and could be even better this year than last. But should we need to give Edwardstone his due credit, TC, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I mean, last year he was good in novice company. He racked up, 5 consecutive victories before being beaten at Aintree at odds on. He was decent in the Tingle Creek on his return, beating Grenadine, who was primed for the race. Last time out at Kempton, he would have won. I mean, I know people are going to be like, well, it was so far out and he fell, and you never know what happens. But he is a much better horse than Editeur de Gite. If he got round and jumped fine, he would have won that race. But it was a very bad mistake. And a general rule I have, no matter who the horse is, if they fell or unseated or whatever last time out, brought down is a completely different thing. But if they fell or unseated last time out, I won't back them next time, just purely because I've had terrible experiences in the past where I back horses that fell last time and go and fall again, and then I just gutted about my own decision. So yeah, look, you have to consider Edwardstone, but I just don't think he's in the same league as Energamine. I just think he's the best horse in the race by an absolute mile. I think he's my banker of the festival. He should be 4-7, not even money. I think that's a great price, as Ross touched on. Is he running Energamine running before the festival? I thought potentially he was going to run in the Clarence House or at the Dublin Race Festival, and if he does, then he's going to be a lot shorter than the even money right now, isn't he? Not only does he tick every single trend that you need for a Champion Chase winner, this horse has huge star quality, like massive star quality. And the reason that people underestimate Edwardstone on a regular basis is not because we don't know that he's a very good horse, because we do. He's rated 170. He's proven himself in novice company. But he was a former handicapper. And when a horse progresses up through the ranks, but it takes them a while to do so, and they're beating in handicap company, you don't gain that initial cult following that you see from horses with star quality, the likes of Energamine, Shishkin, that win their first 5, 6, 7 races, and then you think they're going to be invincible. You don't have that following when you lose a load of handicaps and then go into graded races, start winning them, and you become that improver that hits the top of the top of the tree in your division. You just don't gather the same amount of impetus regarding the racing public. That's why I think he's generally unconsidered for races of this nature. But yeah, back to Energamine. He's won every single chase start that he is contested by 8.5 lengths or more, except for the SBK Clarence House Chase, where he got beat by a prime Shishkin. Keyword there is prime, because if you consider Shishkin where he is now and you think that he beat Energumene, then you'd be thinking, well, even money is pretty short. But this was a prime Shishkin, an unbeatable Shishkin, and he ran a great race in second. Energumene, he's got plenty of speed, as Ross touched on. He's versatile, can be held up, as he showed in last year's race when he beat nothing, but he still won, beat Funambol Sivela by 8.5 lengths. Or he can go to the front, which is the aggressive way, the way you should ride a horse who is dominant with ability. I wouldn't be surprised if they go to the front this year, by the way. His Hilliway victory on his rear appearance, I thought, was very good. It was, yes, a piece of work. It was a canter, paid canter, but at the same time, he was impressive. And yeah, you have to consider Edwardstone, as we touched on. Blue Lord, I think, is better going to the Ryanair, I have to say, especially if there's question marks regarding Allaho. We'll come onto that race in due course. But even if Blue Lord does run here, I just think Energumene's a better horse. And yeah, I'm all over the even money. Short price for ANTE-POST, but I think it's a value price.
Yeah, there's a lot that can happen in between now and then. We're recording this early part of January. We've got the Clarence House coming up on the 21st of January. And from what we've heard, Energumene does go there, as does Edwardstone. So we could see a sort of a preview for the Champion Chase at Ascot. As TC was saying, Energumene was beaten in this race last year in what was one of the races of this century. And he's probably got a lesser race this time around. No Shishkin, as you say, at his prime. So even money now could look pretty good if he goes and wins that race. And Edwardstone will be a lot bigger. The only horse that won't really be affected by it is Blue Lord. And he's the one that we will go on and talk about probably a bit more for the Ryanair. But I'm still going to put him in as my selection here because anything could happen in that Clarence House. And if Energumene doesn't perform, for whatever reason, I still think Blue Lord looks like a solid option. And I think after last time out when he won, Willie Mullins said that he always looked to be a Ryanair horse, but he showed a lot of speed in that race. So he's still umming and ahhing. It is Willie Mullins bingo. I think he's probably the same price for both the Champion Chase and the Ryanair. So in which case, I don't mind him as an ANTE-POST selection for both of them. I really, really like this horse. He's definitely on the upgrade. He's a horse that has had a big reputation. He's a younger type and he just sort of could be anything. And he's just, as we say, it is a betting podcast. It is ANTE-POST and he's more of a betting proposition for me as we stand. So that's the Champion Chase. We'll move swiftly and quite neatly into the Ryanair. Again, this is all about another one of Willie Mullins' runners, Allaho. He's just been pretty flawless, and this is a horse that we really hope to see in the King George. Didn't make it, and one of plenty of horses of Willie Mullins's who we haven't really seen this year for whatever reason, and it looks like he might go straight to the Ryanair to defend his crown. Ross, how do you read into that? Is that something that concerns you? He's obviously a seriously talented horse, but he's clearly had his issues this season.
It doesn't concern me because it just means for me he's just not an ANTE-POST proposition. Because at that sort of price, you're tying up a huge amount of your betting bank on a horse that you just simply don't know, is he going to get there? If he turns up there without a run, that doesn't bother me at all. It's whether he's actually going to turn up there. And I think if you go through this sort of the entries at this stage, Allaho, Galopin Des Champs, well, they're going to want to go for the Gold Cup. He's got to prove he stays 3 miles. We'll get onto him later. Blue Lord, I'm fairly confident he goes to the Champion Chase. Willie Mullins spoke about showing a lot more speed. Darrell Jacob was ecstatic with how much more speed he showed. And he is, I mean, there's no one bigger in that department and decision making than Willie Mullins. They'll go where Willie Mullins says they want to go. But Darrell Jacob's a very influential piece of the jigsaw with Isaac Muir and Suede. So I think he looks like going Champion Chase. Shishkin, I'll come back to him. I'm not finished with Shishkin yet. Conflated, I think they'll want to go to the Gold Cup. Fakir de Uderi will probably run here. Statler is almost certainly going to go to the Gold Cup. He's not coming back in trip. And then you're into Chak and Poursoir and, the likes of Hitman. So the two I am interested in, Shishkin, I think he's not finished yet. I don't get this groundswell of he ran badly in the Champion Chase and they clearly found a problem. Now, people don't like that the problem wasn't found straight after the race and they think it's excuse making. Veterinary medicine being what it is, there's an awful lot of tests that have to be undergone to find out what's wrong. He then came back and ran below par in the Tingle Creek and outpaced the whole way. They've done a piece of work and Nico has, reported that his wind wasn't perfect. They've done a small wind operation. That's enough for me to say, well, maybe he's just had a little bit going on. And a Shishkin that's able to breathe over this sort of trip on a track that he likes, he's dangerous. Whether Allaho's in there or not, he's dangerous. But do I want to be taking 6-1 about him when he might just be one of these horses that has a catalogue of errors and we don't see him this season? No, I don't. But when we review this race closer to the time, he's still on my list. I'm not buying that this horse is finished, and he's with the greatest trainer on either side of the Irish Sea for bringing horses back. There are no bones about that. But the horse I like for the here and now, and I think he's almost certainly going to run here because he clearly didn't stay 3 miles in the Savills Chase, travelled really well and caught my eye, is French Dynamite for Mouse Morris. I thought he jumped really nicely off a fairly slow pace early, and then when they quickened it up, he travelled like a very smart horse and then hit the rising ground going into unknown territory. And I think the petrol gauge hit empty. That form in the Cheltenham Handicap when beaten by Galore is looking better and better, and he would have beaten Galore that day if he'd have jumped the last fence. He'll travel off a strong pace. This could cut down to a very small field. I'm confident he's going there. So from the view of ANTE-POST betting being about trying to build a portfolio of horses that you found the right target and you found a price that they're going to go off shorter, I'm more than happy to take the sort of 20-1 or bigger about him.
33-1 then isn't too bad.
That'll do.
Yeah, that'll do. Obviously, Mouse Morris as well his trainer has had what's been only could be called a quiet time. This is one of a small number of horses he's had. He actually had a really good December, 3 winners, and there's only been a couple of months over the last few years where he's had more than 1 winner that month. So it's just been a really, really difficult time for him, or quieter time for him. French Dynamite hoping to sort of really spearhead a small team for the Grand National winning trainer. But that's the 33-1 for French Dynamite at this stage. ANTE-POST for Ross. TC, we've talked about Allaho and how Ross isn't too concerned about him coming into this race without a run, if he is to come. I suppose that is all the ifs and buts. Is there anything that you think is likely to run that you'd be hopeful for and is good value at this stage?
I think it's a really hard race to decipher. I mean, we're filming this on January the 12th. At the moment, we're going on the basis that Allaho is running and he's 15-8, 7-4 favourite, and then you're looking 6-1 bar. So he holds a vast chunk of the market. I don't want to tread on already trodden ground where we've covered Allaho and Blue Lord, etc. I think Blue Lord runs here if Allaho doesn't impress Willie Mullins in the build-up, because Blue Lord is a perfect horse that has a good chance of winning this race if Allaho's not showing his A game at home, if he does or doesn't turn up. And also, unlike Ross, I've got a slightly different opinion on Allaho. If he does run here, without a prep run, I would be completely against him. Now, his first time out form figures have been okay in the past. And obviously he's won this race, the last 2 editions, by 12 lengths and 14 lengths respectively. Super impressive both times. So you have to consider that. But he would be a very short price considering we haven't seen him for 300 plus days. He's clearly had issues. And also, when you look at the actual pieces of form, first time up every year, it looks like he's needed the run. Last year, he made his debut in the John Durkin. He won that race, but he produced an RPR 13 pounds shy of his best, nowhere near the same level that he performed in this race at the Cheltenham Festival. 12 months earlier, he also began his season in the John Durkin. He finished 6th with an RPR of 51 pounds below his best. In 2019, he was beaten first time up, and the same can be said for 2018 as well. So he's a horse that, in my opinion, yes, can still perform to a good level, but at the same time isn't performing to that elite level that we know Allaho can when he's coming off a layoff. Now, I know Willie Mullins is fantastic at training horses off layoffs, without layoffs, one of the best trainers in the game. But it would be a worry for me at a short price, especially when there are other horses in the field right now from an Anti-Post perspective that you could side with, no matter if they're running in this race or not. And I'm willing to take a chance that Conflated will go here on the basis that Gordon Elliott will see this as a much easier option than running in the Cheltenham Gold Cup, which will come to. It looks a very good renewal. This year's Ryanair doesn't look a great renewal, aside from Allaho, in my opinion. And despite being 9, much like Allaho, Conflated remains open to further improvement over fences. He's only run 4 in 14 chase events, and he ran a screamer in this race last year. He was going to be clear-cut second behind Allaho, but unfortunately he fell at the second last when he was making a move into minor money. He's warmed up for this race with a victory in the Savills Chase. Now, Savills Chase is known for being a good prep for the Gold Cup, so you could see why people might think he'll be going to the feature race on Friday. And it wasn't a prime renewal of the Savills either, but at the same time, it was a good performance. Elliott hinted that the Gold Cup will be the way to go, but I prefer him over this kind of trip anyway. So in the Anti-Post market, I'm not going to be chucking, a lot of the balance on, not 2-3 points win on Conflated, but I think a 1 point win or 1 point each way around 16, 20 to 1 is a perfectly fine bet, given that if he goes to the Gold Cup, I'm not going to be annoyed anyway because I wouldn't be backing him for that race. And there's nothing else in this Ryanair field, barring Blue Lord, who again has the question marks about whether he's going to run, that actually interests me. So yeah, Conflated is going to be my selection, but who knows whether he runs there. It's probably 50-50 right now.
Yeah, he's 16 to 1. I know it was Michael Leary said after Christmas that he's going to run in the Ryanair. And you never know whether he's being sarcastic or not. He wants to win his own race, but if you look at the other options that Gordon Elliott has in the Gold Cup, Fury Road and Galvin, who have, they're really up against it, especially with form with Conflated. It'd be hard to think that Gordon Elliott wouldn't want a proper live chance in that race. But it depends who's going to win the battle, I suppose, and depends who wins the battle for fitness as well. And that's what we said about Allaho. So that's why an insurance bet for me at this stage, if I had to have one at Anti-Post, would be Blue Lord. Because if Allaho wasn't ready, then Willie Mullins wants to run it. He's got Energy Mean in at over 2 miles for the Champion Chase. I think Blue Lord's well within his capabilities to take 2.5, especially if it's a weak renewal of the Ryanair, which it could be. He's around 6 to 1, I think. So yeah, it's intriguing at this stage. The 2 races I think really have got more depth to it as it stands and are probably better Anti-Post propositions. The next ones we're going to discuss, the Stayers Hurdle and then onto the Gold Cup. The Stayers Hurdle, every year, Ross and TC, is this puzzle where we think we might have a horse that's going to encapsulate the Stayers Hurdle division and really fly the flag for Stayers, but then we just get slightly disappointed that they can't sort of keep up to a sort of a trajectory or an invincibility, as we spoke about with Constitution Hill. Flooring Porter was such a sensational winner, but he's got a couple of chinks in his armour, doesn't he? You never really know if they're sort of saving something a bit back to just get him spot on for another win in this race. I kind of thought that when I saw his run last time out over Christmas. The betting also thinks that they are going to get him spot on for the Stayers Hurdle to win it again. He's 5 to 1. Home by the Lee is this new, where has he come from? Runner for Joseph O'Brien, who's proven himself twice now this season, 6 to 1. Classical Dream is a bit of an enigma, 8 to 1. Teopu is the one that beats Honeysuckle, 8 to 1. Blazing Carl, will he, won't he, 10 to 1. Then you got the old boy Paisley Park, who showed himself to be back to his very best. But can he win a Stayers? He's 10s. Marie's Rock is in here. Will she go up to 3 miles? 12 to 1. Then you got Monkfish. Incredible, really. I think that's definitely a tentative entry, as is the likes of Sir Gerhard. It's a really interesting puzzle, as it always is. TC, I'll come to you first, because we were saying that we want a proper betting contest at this stage. It's always an intriguing one. It's not a race that it overexcites people, but from a betting proposition, it can do, especially at this stage. So what do you think about it at this moment in time?
Yeah, it's a wide open contest right now, and it will be a wide open contest on the day. I know your selection already, Jess, but I'm going to go with I'm going to tell you my opinion now. I'm not backing Flooring Porter, and that's for certain. And if Flooring Porter wins for a third consecutive year, I will do a forfeit, which we can discuss in the meantime. Before I will do it on the Cheltenham review, or the podcast after the festival. I'm not wearing a Borat mankini, but I will do literally anything. I'm certain.
You to do that.
That's the only thing I will not do. But I'm literally certain in my mind, and I could be wrong. This is horse racing; it's all about opinions. But Flooring Porter is not for me, and the reason for that. Well, there are numerous reasons, but the crux of the reason why I don't like him. Firstly, I don't think his 2 efforts this year have been overly promising. Now, maybe they were holding back a little bit last time out, but at the same time, I just wasn't wowed or even interested in that effort going forward. I thought he was a horse that was potentially regressing. And the main reason why I don't like him is this race for the last 2 years, all the other jockeys couldn't have gifted it to Flooring Porter anymore. It was, last year especially, was absolutely ridiculous. I'm actually still annoyed by it now. It's 11 months on or 10 months on. It's just a bit embarrassing, isn't it, that I'm still annoyed by that. But Jonathan Moore went to the front on Flooring Porter. There was no pace pressure, nothing at all. He was allowed to just set his own fractions on the front end, cruise through the early part of the race, and go ahead to the line and win quite decisively. The only horse that even tried to put any pressure on Flooring Porter was Champ, who is a horse that doesn't want to be in the vanguard from an early stage, as we've seen recently in his last time out effort. I don't know. I just can't back him. If he wins, then fantastic. The podcast will be interesting after Cheltenham, but he's not for me. There are a couple of horses that I would prefer in this race. I've already had a little bit on Home by the Lee, though I do think his price now at around 6-1 is too short, which is why I'm not putting him up in the pod. I had a little ANTE-POST wager on him, and I'm not a massive ANTE-POST punter, I have to admit, but after the Liz Mullen hurdle back in November, I thought that was a good performance where he beat Bob Ollinger, who I still held in a decent regard at that stage. So I had a couple quid on him. But as I say, I think he's a little short now. So my recommendation at this stage, and it's going to be a left field rogue move, but it's to back Sir Gerhard, because in the Ultimate Jumps podcast that we did at the start of the year, September, October, whenever it was, I put him up then. And I said, I did a public plea to Willie Mullins, please run in this race, because this horse is well suited to the Stayers Hurdle. We haven't seen him this year. If you're going to go chasing with him, then it's pretty tough ask at this stage of the season to start doing that. His bumper form was really good. His novice hurdle form was really good. He's always shaped like a stayer in the making. I think he's open to loads of improvement over this trip, and he's 2 from 2 at Cheltenham. So there are loads of positives for him. The likelihood of him running here, I don't know, probably not high. But if he does, and there's a last minute, you see a Twitter notification, so Gerhard running in the Stayers Hurdle, then I'll be celebrating, because I think he's got a great chance. You look at the others further down the market, Paisley Park, I can't have him. He's just a little bit old now. Albeit he ran really well last time out. Classical Dream, I was with him last year. I still haven't got over that race, as you can tell, so I won't be going back in on him. So yeah, I'll stick with Sir Gerhard. Home by the Lee as the saver. They'll be my 2.
Just trying to work out what kind of forfeit we could think up for you. That's definitely
no rash decisions.
That's
no
definitely
rash
something
decisions.
I'm going to own, considering Flooring Porter is my selection. I'm thinking something, you've got to be at Kempton with something on your head, like I'm a chicken or something walking
Everton
around.
Bobblehead, yes.
Hey, that's too far.
We will work it out. So Gerhard, 3 weeks ago, they confirmed that he had got an injury, that he would be out for a few weeks. Knowing horses, you'd want them to be in pretty serious work, or definitely in a good place right now to be thinking of Cheltenham. And they did say chasing is the idea. So we'll see. We'll see if Willie Mullins is definitely a regular listener to this podcast, though, Tom. So I'm sure he is listening now. How are you, Willie? If you are, Ross. Look, I think it's fair to throw in a bit of a curveball in this race, because it is so wide open. And I agree with TC that Flooring Porter hasn't looked as enthusiastic, as we should say, in those races as he was coming into it this time last year. But maybe because of that, they are just saving him a little bit. Danny Mullins was actually done for dropping his hands, wasn't he, last time at over the Christmas meeting? I think he's got one way of riding this horse in terms of Cheltenham, and he'll do it again. It'll either work or it won't work. 5-1 is short enough for me. I wouldn't want it to be any shorter. That's why I'd want to take it right now. But there's probably value out there as well. So I'd like to hear what you found.
I completely agree with TC, and I think you've got to try and look at this from a slightly left field point of view, because the ones at the head of the market, they all beat each other, don't they? Flooring Porter beats Home by the Lee, Classical Dream beats Flooring Porter beats Classical Dream. You know, they're all much of a muchness. Now, TC's absolutely right in that the twice Flooring Porter has won the Stayers Hurdlers because he's got the best ride, and those in behind have probably been a little bit slow on the uptake. Jockeys are great. They're exceptionally brave, brilliant characters. There's probably no space at NASA because someone's chosen to be a jockey rather than go and be a rocket scientist. But surely they're not going to let the same thing happen a third time. But then we said that last year, and the reason it happens is because no one else actually wants to go on. Blazing Carl, my Twitter is full all the time of, is Blazing Carl going for this race? Is he not? Does it really matter? I mean, he's got form around the course, but he beat Gelino Bello. I mean, what would Gelino Bello be if priced up in this? He'd be a huge price. I think it's a sort of one of these Twitter things that gets spun up. I don't think he's value at the price he is now, and to be honest, I'm not sure he's got standout claims anyway. I think Tihupu is interesting in that maybe it's not that he's ground dependent, it's just that the ground brings out his stamina, and he has won on better ground than soft and heavy. So I thought he was interesting if they decide to go up in trip. And then I just looked a little bit further down the market, and I think the same could be applied for Saint-Sam from Willie Mullins' yard. I was desperate for them to run in the Turners last year over 2.5 miles. I thought he'd been crying out for going up in trip, albeit he can be keen early in his races. I thought his performance at Punchestown, given how keen he was in the early stages on desperate ground, stayed on really well over 2 mile 4. If he goes for this race, and if and I don't quite know what will happen to TC if it does happen, they let Danny Mullins stack them all up and drop anchor in the middle part of the race, and it turns into a sprint up the hill. He's quicker than all of these. There's no two ways about that. He'll stay well. I don't know where else they're going to send him if they don't send him here. So that appeals to me. I just thought he was interesting from at the prices when those at the head of the market. I mean, I just think this race is primed to be set up for something new and fresh. And then we'll be talking in April about how Danny Mullins schooled them all from the front and won a third Stayers on Flooring Porter as TC sat there in his Everton kit.
With a chicken hat on. Sam intriguing returning to hurdles from novice chasing last year, and actually Willie Mullins said after that win on New Year's Eve that he is bred to stay further than 2.5 miles. So you'd have to imagine that this is exactly the kind of target that they're looking for. Saint-Sam, who were unseated at Cheltenham, but the only other time when he was second in the Boodles, wasn't he? So he's got form around Cheltenham, and that's always a query as well. Horses that haven't got there before, do they act on the track? And those are different various elements too. So Saint-Sam 14-1. As I said before, I'm fine that Ross and TC completely disagree with me. That's all right. That gives me more of an impetus to put up Flooring Porter at 5-1. As I said, I don't want him to be any shorter than this. I actually thought he could have been a little bit bigger. Based on the fact that his runs this season have not looked as inspiring as last year's. But I do think that he is being completely trained for this race and this race only. Home by the Lee is this new pretender in this sphere. But I would have to see him do it at Cheltenham, which we haven't. And as we've said, the likes of Classical Dream just doesn't hit it enough for me. Tiopu, I think, was flattered a little bit. Paisley Park, what an admirable horse, but maybe he's possibly done a lot of hard races early on in this season, especially in such high class company, and he's now another year older. So I think Flooring Porter at 5-1 is worth it. I'll just make a note on Buzz quickly. He is a tentative entry. He's going to have to do a lot more than he is at the moment for it to be a definite. But you've got to be in it at this stage. So we made the entry but he would be coming off a huge layoff. But the plan is to have him running at some stage this springtime. So it's nice to have him in there and see his name. Okay, that's the Stayers Hurdle. We'll go into the Gold Cup because this is the one that I think we're going to get most interest out of, because this is a good race, guys. If they all get there, I really hope they do, because I think we've got some really good older horses. We've got some new, younger ones. We've got a Grand National winner. This has got something for everyone. And you've got an American Grand National winner as well. So I love this. I love the feel to this race. Galopin de Champs deserves, I think, to be at the top at 7-4, but he's far too short for me in this Gold Cup. L'Empresse, 7-1. Noble Yates, the Grand National winner, is 8-1. Last year's winner, Appelutard, 11-1. Brave Man's Game, the King George winner, 9-1. Protectorat, 11. Statler, 11s. Conflated 20s. And then you've got to go all the way back to 2 years ago, the winner of this race 2 years ago, Manila Indo, 39-1. I've named a lot of horses and a lot of races that these horses have been winning. I love the makeup of this race, Ross. It's got a real good feel to it. And I think there's some nice prices at this stage from an Anti-Post perspective for to get our teeth into. What do you think?
I cannot wait for this. I mean, if these all line up, it'd be the best Gold Cup I can remember seeing in my adult lifetime, I think. Some would argue I'm not an adult yet. I
was about to say, how many Gold Cups have there been, Ross?
Got there before you.
That's not fair.
Galopin des Champs, I love. And I thought the most taking thing about his reappearance was how he sort of lobbed along behind the bridle. He was just so far removed from the horse that just tore off round Leopardstown last year. I think it gives him a great chance of seeing out this trip. But I think the price is short enough. And actually, I'd probably be more inclined to take an even shorter price about him if he wins over 3 miles at the Dublin Racing Festival, which I think is the plan. Because just all along last year, I loved him last year, as you know, but you just couldn't think that a horse with this much speed and this much exuberance could be a Gold Cup horse. But the way he went about his business on his reappearance completely changed my opinion. I was pretty keen on L'Empresse at the start of the year for the Gold Cup. And then just watching the King George back, I know he unseated, I know he jumped out to his left, but Brave Man's Game was going away from him. He wasn't coming back at Brave Man's Game. And it's just planted a little doubt about stamina, which I had no doubt about stamina for this whatsoever. So maybe I'm overthinking it. Noble Yates is fascinating, but all his best form is on flat tracks. He's going to have to prove he acts around a track like this. His jumping is going to have to survive in the early part. And I know that's saying it about a horse that's won the biggest jumping test there is in the Grand National, but I just think this is going to be run at an end-to-end gallop, and I have a slight concern over that. Brave Man's Game, I don't think he stays, but I didn't think he'd stay in the King George, so bear that in mind when you're listening to me. Protectorat, I'm not a fan of. Statler, I think, is really interesting, but I'd already advised him on the Ultimate Pod at a bigger price. I still think he's a decent price, around about 11-12-1, but he's already in my portfolio, so I can pass him over. So the one that I think is overpriced is Royal Pagaille, and that's assuming it's going to be a soft ground Gold Cup. If it's not, you can forget me. He just hasn't got the gears. But he did really well in the King George over effectively an inadequate stamina test. But it just shows that the ground makes a big difference to him. He stuck on from a long way back last year in the Gold Cup, having got outpaced. We're probably due a genuine soft ground Gold Cup, and it would just be typical, wouldn't it? We've all moaned about there being no rain through the early part of the season, and then when we're expecting spring ground, we'll get an absolute bog. And there's plenty of rain around at the moment. Yes, we're some way out. So I just thought, in terms of an Anti-Post portfolio, Royal Pagaille, if the rain comes, will be nowhere near 33-1 on the day. Again, sticking to is he likely to go for this race or go somewhere else? If he runs at Cheltenham, he runs in this race. You've been a big fan of him for a long time, so I'm just sort of trying to jump on your tail, really. And I was really impressed with him in the King George.
Well, you can get bigger than 59-1 at the moment from SBK perspective, I do love Roper Guy, and I thought he ran a great race in this last year as well, an admirable effort, and he's clearly a horse that has had his issues and his niggles. You'd imagine he's off to the Peter Marsh as well, which he loves. But yeah, soft ground will be the making of him. And yeah, he's just a lovable horse. So Roper Guy at this stage for Ross Miller, and what's a really good renewal, we hope, of this Gold Cup. TC, we've got a lot of new up-and-coming horses. Noble Yates is listening to Emmett Mullins saying, does he have a class of this kind of graded race? We've got Galopin Des Champs, who, he's a novice coming into open company. And in the past, it's not really been favourable for those types of horses. And you've wanted horses that have a little bit more experience. And you've got Brave Man's Game, your King George winner. And we've touched on whether he is a Cheltenham Festival horse or not, and I think they're just happy to keep him fresh and give it a go. But then you've got these horses who've ran in the Gold Cup, A Plus Tard, Minella Indo. They've been there, they've done it, they've given it a go, so we know that they can compete. But is it a better race than we've seen before? And what is your belief at this stage that has genuine value for the Gold Cup come March?
Yeah, it's an absolute corker. I completely agree with both of your standpoints. Really looking forward to this race. Going to be the best race of the festival, I'm sure, if they all turn up. My brief opinions on the horses you've touched on there. Galopin Des Champs, probably the second best jumps horse in training right now behind Constitution Hill. Definitely the horse to beat if he stays. And I do think he will stay. Therefore, 7-4 or whatever price is right at the moment when we're filming is probably value. But at the same time, there's a lot of depth in this race. And would I want to take 7-4 about a horse I'm not 100% sure stays, and I'm not 100% sure will settle in behind in a race of this nature, hustle and bustle of the Gold Cup? Probably not at this stage, but I think he's definitely the horse to beat. Others, Brave Man's Game, yes, I've really fancied him the King George, and he did it well despite a less than par ride. But I just don't think Cheltenham's the right track for him, so he's not on my radar here. I expect Lotton Presse to probably reverse the King George form. I know he fell, but he would have been second. He's better suited to Cheltenham. Noble Yates, I think, was is the last horse off my shortlist. He was the horse I was tempted to put up, but I didn't, because Grand National winners in the Gold Cup, there's just a trend that you can't really hang your hat on as the ideal prep coming into this race. But he was really good last time out. I think he has the mixture of speed and stamina, which you just don't see from normal Grand National winners, which should allow him to compete in a Gold Cup. Minella Indo just not at his best. A Plus Tard hard to back after the Betfair Chase. Protectorat tends to make mistakes around Cheltenham. So that's kind of the synopsis of the leading contenders outside of my selection, which is Statler. Much like Ross, also put him up in the Ultimate Podcast back in September or October, whenever we filmed it. And I put him up as my ANTE-POST bet to follow on betting.getsbk.com. Check that website out if you haven't already. Last year, after the Cheltenham Festival, when he won the National Hunt Chase, because I really fancied him for the National Hunt Chase, and he looked like a horse who was going to progress into a super Gold Cup contender. That hasn't unfortunately happened yet, because we haven't seen him all that often. And he got beat on his reappearance by Minella Indo, who I've just said doesn't look back to his best. However, there's a reason why I think Statler lost that race on New Year's Day. Two horses went on early on, including Minella Indo. They kind of crawled through the early stages for horses of their talent, and then they quickened up. Statler was in behind. He's clearly a stayer, won the National Hunt Chase over further, needs a trip, and this race was over, I think, 2 miles 6 furlongs or something similar to that, 2 miles 5.5. And he travelled like the best horse in the race, came to make his move, and just blew up in the closing stages. He's a horse who needs his first run of the season. Yet he still managed to show that turn of foot, that acceleration and class of a Grade 1 competitor. And I don't know what he was beating. It was a head or a short head by Minella Indo, who's obviously a Grade 1 horse at his very best. I believe 10-1 is still an extremely fair each way price. I can't remember what it was for the Ultimate Podcast, maybe 16s, which we both jumped on at the time, Ross and I. But I still think 10-1 is very fair. I think he goes off single figures in the day. Course form, he's blown away the cobwebs. There's a lot to like about Statler.
It could be a very nice ride for a second string jockey from the Willie Mullins camp if we're seeing Paul Tannen's on Galopin Des Champs. Patrick Mullins, potentially. Danny?
Either. I mean, I'd be happy to have either of them on board. Patrick obviously rode him in the National Hunt Chase, so he knows him very well. Danny rode him in a couple of novice hurdles, one at Leopardstown, one at Punchestown in 2021. Didn't win on either occasion, but he finished third behind Galopin des Champs on one of the occasions, which leans to maybe Danny Mullins takes the ride here. And the other one, he finished third to Gaillard du Mesnil, who's going to be a short price for one of the races he runs in at the Cheltenham Festival. So, yeah, I wouldn't be adverse to either of those taking the ride on Statler. I wouldn't consider that a negative in any way.
Yeah, okay, so 11-1 for Statler, second string for Willie Mullins if they both get there. But considering the way it's going, these ones look pretty certain. We aren't too sure about some of them. I think the guys made perfect explanations about Galopin des Champs. I think he's got everything going for him, but I just don't like that price at 7-4, where this novice and open company in a very deep looking renewal of the Gold Cup against horses who've been there and done that. And for me, just my quick thoughts to add to this, Ross touched on Minella Indo. Look, this horse is probably seen his best days. Obviously, he's a previous Gold Cup winner. He beat Statler by a neck last time out and gave the Savills Chase, giving Henry de Bromhead a fabulous victory. He was getting weight from Statler as well, so there were things in his advantage, but he has won a Gold Cup and he's been second in the Gold Cup. And I think at the price that you can get him at 39-1 currently, that is not a bad each way price for a former Gold Cup winner. That probably will be, I don't know if he potentially might just go straight there. They might run him again at the Dublin Racing Festival, but I would be happy to see him go there fresh. He's been beaten before at the Dublin Racing Festival. He's been beaten by Conflated in the Irish Gold Cup last year, and then went on to finish a good second to a Plutard. And a Plutard I haven't put up because I was too worried about what happened there at the Betfair Chase last time. Then he got a knock. He just hasn't had a great year. And I think Henry de Bromhead wouldn't want him to go into this, even if he does get a prep run in, with what's been a bit of a truncated season so far. L'Homme Pressé will be my other selection at 7-1. I've loved this horse and seen what he's done. I'll forgive him for that unseat and in a track that clearly didn't play to his strengths at Kempton last time, the King George. He'll be much more at home at Cheltenham. He'll want the ground to be softer as well. I'm happy to see him go around this right way round that he likes to go. I'm really looking forward to seeing him against Galopin des Champs in a race where I think it's the young pretenders against the older sorts, and it's the time to see who really leads the pack in that way. And I just think at 7-1, he's a slightly better value for the Gold Cup come March. So there is 3 and a bit months away now, plenty more water to go under the bridge, and we will be looking at Cheltenham again, no doubt. Closer to the time, we'll have specific previews of the Cheltenham Festival, and it'll be interesting to see where we get to by then, the prices of some of these horses, maybe some of their prep runs, and we'll be able to review them to think if they've enhanced their reputations or decreased them. But as it stands, we hope we've given you something to think about from an ANTE-POST perspective. Thanks as ever to Ross and to Tom. A reminder that new SBK customers can get £30 in free bets by betting £10, and so that might add to a little pot for your ANTE-POST betting for the Cheltenham Festival. We are back every week with a specific look at the racing for the weekend. So if you're dropping in just to listen to this for Cheltenham Festival, we're not just a one-off podcast. We endeavour to give you selections for the weekend's racing week after week. So you can find us on all your podcast channels and on YouTube. So thank you for listening. Good luck for March, and we will see you soon.